Now over here on the bench, I have the old fuel pump that I put off. The new fuel pumps do not come with a strainer unless you buy the whole unit as a one piece like I did. And the main reason I did that on this is the gas gauge didn't work on the car. And I have it apart, so I figured I might as well do both. But the first thing you'll have to do to get your old fuel pump, and that's why you need a new strainer, is you will have to get that strainer off in there. And to do that, usually you can just get something in there. Because like I say, it's not real important on it because you're not reusing it anyway, as far as the strainer goes. And you can just kind of hit that like that. And that kind of pops it right off. Now you do have this. If you flip this around, again, like I say, you want to be careful if you're reusing it that you don't bend your float. You have this wire harness right here. And that wire harness just unplugs. Bend that clip. Bend this clip. And out comes your plug. Your fuel pump is pretty much free to remove. What you've got to do is just kind of push this little rubber piece up out of your way. Sometimes you can get it with it, sometimes you have to move it. This comes also with the new fuel pump. But you will get your fuel pump kind of spread out away from that, and then it will slide right off that stem. And there you have your sending unit without the fuel pump. And then when you're ready to put your new fuel pump in, of course you have that rubber piece right there. It's just the reverse process. You will stick that up on the stem. You will kind of hold it in place. Get it forced up in there. Get this lined up down into the two nubs. It pops through. The fuel pump basically just sits right there in place like that. So, once you've got your new fuel pump on, then of course, your strainer. I guess, you could use the old strainer if you wanted to, but they will not honor your warranty if you do not use a new strainer. So it's best just to get one. They're usually only another $8-10, and you've already gone through all the work of taking the tank off and the fuel pump out, so you might just as well get a new strainer for it, because if the strainer ends up being plugged, you're still going to have issues trying to get the car to run properly and get the right amount of fuel pressure. But once you've got that back in, you're good to go. And like I say on this, you can either use, it comes with another harness, but you'd have to snip the wires right here and splice them. Or you can just continue to use the same exact plug you had. You just plug that back in. Once you've got your new fuel pump on, it's just going to sit there. It's going to be much tighter going on than what this one is. This was the old one in the old sending unit. And as you can see, it just kind of moves, and it's got play back and forth. It'll go up and down. Once you put your new one on, it's going to be pretty stiff. It isn't going to go anywhere. This piece here, if you bend it a little bit down like that, you can just bend it kind of back up. What that does, that's just a fuel pump stand to kind of keep the fuel pump setting up on top of it. And once you've got this all in place and your wires all plugged back in, you're ready to stick the fuel pump and sender unit back into the tank. So we'll run over to the tank, and I will stick the new one back in and show you that. Here we are. If your new fuel pump is on, the new strainer is on. As you can see, everything's new, looking pretty good on it. She's ready to go. Now all you have to do come over here. And then the other thing you're going to have to do is just put this ring, slide it over your pipes and over the thing there. But again, you want to be careful as to how you're putting that in so that you don't bend your float. Get your strainer down in place there. Your O-ring. Just kind of get it up there. Get her sitting down in there. Get your O-ring kind of in place. The fuel pump's only going to go in one direction. As you can see, there's a notch right here, and then there's this piece that sticks up. So once you get that turned into place, and the O-ring is in place, that should kind of just set right down in there for you. Once you've got that in there like that, and it's setting down, what I like to do is I like to put a little never-sees over the existing plate and on the snap ring piece itself, just because it helps it to slide easier when it's going in. And then if you do have to pull it out again for some reason in the future, it's a lot easier to do. Then all you've got to do once you've got that in place, you just kind of get this to start locking in. Then you take your hammer again and your little chisel, flat punch. You got to kind of tap from one side to another, because if you don't, as it goes in, as you can see, it kind of doesn't go in centered. But you want to kind of keep it centered. Once it gets to a spot right there, I'm not sure if you can see it, this spot is going to, this little nub is going to stop right there, and then that's going to lock that ring into place. It's locked in, that one's locked in. The ones under the line are a little bit hard to lock to a certain extent. And there you have it. The ring looks pretty much even all the way around. That's kind of what you're looking for. You want it to be, I mean, once it's in, it's not going anywhere. It kind of locks into those grooves like I was saying. And you're sending units nice and tight. It's back in place. You don't have to be too concerned about which way these lines are facing, because like I said, that has a nub right there. That fuel pump can go only one direction. Then you have your wires. This wire is your low fuel light. That plugs in the right, that's your low fuel light wire. And that wire is going to plug in right over to here, and that locks in, clips in there. That is your wire. Now these wires here, those are the ones that are going to plug back into your tank and up under the body there once the tank is back in. Now, as long as you've got that in, and you've got these lines here all attached the way they need to be, and sometimes you want to be careful with those because they can pull out when they're on the old rusty lines. A lot of times it's hard. The O-rings may pop out, and you just want to put them back in. It goes in with an O-ring, a spacer, an O-ring, and then like a retainer that holds everything in. And I do the same thing there. I put just a little bit of never-sees right around the stem where it goes into it, just so they slide on and off a little easier. And then also on these two fittings here is where your vent hose and your filler hose goes. I always put a little of a never seize on that, just so that the hoses don't stick, because the hoses come off really hard on those when they've been on a long time. Sometimes you have to cut them and split them, which I had to do on this one for the vent hose, so I will have to replace that little section of hose. That's no big deal. It's just a 5/8 chunk of hose that's going to go on there. Any kind of like radiator or heater hose type of stuff is good for that, because it's just the vent hose. The filler hose, you try not to split that, so you just try to work that till it breaks loose. Just because that's the gas filler hose, and you don't really want to have to, have that be damaged if that's the case there. But if it does, you can get that. Sometimes they're a little bit long enough. If you just damaged a little of it, you can, just splice it and replace it. Just, use the same hose and just have a little splice in it. But other than that, that's how you get the fuel pump and everything back in. Now that is ready to be bolted back up underneath the car, which is going to be the next step that I'll go through. And that's the gas tank with everything ready to go back up under the car. And now with everything back together, one thing I thought I'd mention is the fuel pump in that, it's kind of expensive. The fuel pump is $70-some. The sending unit, if you don't need that, you can usually get by with just the fuel pump. But if your gas gauge isn't working, it's reading either full all the time or empty, or it just doesn't work, then chances are you need the new sending unit. You don't necessarily have to replace it. You can still do the same thing that we did on this car for so long. We just calculated about 20 miles to the gallon, and every time we put 5-10 gallons of fuel in it, we would just reset the odometer and just keep track of the miles. But that sending unit itself is like $130 is what that costs at AutoZone. So you're going to have about $200 into doing it yourself. And if you have the means to be able to do it, as far as, the floor jack, the jack stands, the way to get up under the car, enough tools to do it. You only need a 15 millimeter socket to pull the gas tank straps down. And then, of course, your pliers and stuff to kind of work the clips on the old line. Those clips there, I had a hard time getting off the old rusted lines. But that's why I prefer to put them back together with a little bit of lubricant of some kind on them. But if not, if you can't do it yourself and you take it into a shop, you're talking, anywhere from $300 to $700 to get it done for you, depending on who does it. So if you're able to do it yourself, you can save a substantial amount of money. But if you're not able to do it, and you don't have a whole lot of choice, because they charge high labor to do these, and it would be much easier on a hoist than what it is on a floor jack like I have my car. But if you want your car running again, sometimes we're left with no choice to pay somebody else to have to do it. And also what I have here is a new fuel filter. This is recommended anytime you change the fuel pump, just because you can have a lot of gunk in the old fuel filter, and, you pull them out, the gas dumps out of them, you turn them back on, they have rust and junk in it, and that rust blows through, or they could be plugged and helping to restrict the flow. This is another $10, so altogether you're still going to have a couple $100 into it, but it's much cheaper than doing it yourself. This particular one has that push-in type of clip, and it threads on the one end. Now sometimes these nuts here at the end of this side gets really rusty, and it makes it hard to be able to get the nut out of that. A lot of times you've got to put a couple pairs of vice grips and some WD-40 on it and just kind of work it slowly back and forth, hoping that the nut on the other end will spin on the line, because if not, it twists that line off. If it looks like you're going to do that, Normally what I will do is I will just go a little bit back farther on this line where it connects, and I will cut it with a small pair of pipe cutters. And then I'll use like a 3/8 compression type coupling, or flared fittings. Flare the ends and put some nuts on them just so that you can have that line back together. And then once you've got it off, you can kind of work it, so that it'll spin freely inside your fuel filter to get it back on.